There are 7 huge money mistakes that people make in their 20s that are setting them up for failure. And I'm not talking about whether or not you have a credit card. The first one is not cooking for yourself at your own house. People spend so much money going out to eat constantly, especially when they don't have something pre-prepared or already waiting at their house for them. Now, I'm not gonna get into time value and all that when it comes to whether or not you should eat out or cook for yourself or something like that, because when you're early in your 20s, the reality is you have the time to cook for yourself and people just don't do it. Viewing eating out as more of a privilege is something that you can still enjoy, but not spend all of your money on. I know for a fact that you can live off $50 a week for all of your food and eat plenty, like I know I have, because I've done it for the past 5 years. Number 2 is buying a new car, and I could go on a rant about this forever. Nothing pains me more than seeing somebody with their first job out of college buying a new car. Who the heck are you listening to that's saying buying a car is the right thing to do now that you have a job? It's literally the fastest way to set yourself back. Here's a crazy revelation I've had. My car and a brand new car can get you from point A to point B in the exact same way. But here is the difference. I bought my car cash, and these cars that are brand new are getting financed with monthly payments that are adding to your monthly expenses that you have to make up, on top of the fact that maintenance on these brand new cars is way more expensive, they depreciate way quicker, and they're no different. The only problem is you have to take better care of them because it's a lot bigger deal if it gets a little scratch on it. I love buying cars for cash, especially the car I have right now. It's an old Prius that I paid $4,000 for total. I've driven this thing over 40,000 miles in 1 year without a single issue. And it's not some magical event. It's just an old, reliable car that gets me from point A to point B and doesn't cost me any additional money. Seriously, please stop buying new cars, people. When you're in your 20s, you do not need them. The third one is living expenses, and this is going to differ depending on what your current life situation is. If you're married like I am, it may be a little bit different than if you're not. But here's the baseline. You don't need to be living at the beach on a waterfront apartment when you're in your 20s. And you definitely don't need to be living alone. For all the people that say rent is unaffordable these days, they're bringing that on themselves. I know for a fact I have plenty of friends that only spend $500 or $600 a month to live in their houses. It's not 3-4 people to a room, it's just sharing a house with other people. It's not that hard. And if you're married, don't make excuses like you can't do the same thing. No, I'm not talking about having people necessarily live inside your house, but I can tell you, my wife and I spend basically no money to own our house by house hacking. Now I'll break that down more in a different video, but here's the point. Living expenses don't have to be that expensive. Quit treating yourself like you've already made it when you're in your 20s, because you haven't. So figure out a way to reduce your living expense just like everything else right now so that you can focus on making more money. Now these 3 things are a baseline starting point because they're the essentials that every human needs to live, right? Food, transportation, and a place to live. Now oftentimes people allow those 3 things to already add up to the money that you're making. So a great first step is making sure that you're lowering those expenses and controlling them first before you even move on to the rest of these. Now number 4 is spending money on status. Seriously, if you're spending money on things just so other people think you're gonna look cool, you may need to be rethinking things a little bit. Here's a really cool secret that I learned this year. Nobody that matters cares anything about that. And if you wanna really dig into why it's so unimpressive, here's the thing. Spending money is not a skill. Anybody can spend money. So why would you think somebody would be impressed because you do it? Now, what if instead of spending money on status, you continue to spend money on education? Why is it that people think that they can spend money on college that half the time you don't even end up using, but after that you can't spend any more money on education? There's your money hack. The real people that matter are gonna think that's cool, not spending money on the status. Now the 5th mistake that people make is saving money just to save it. I bet you 5-10 years ago, you probably thought saving $100 was a big deal, but now that barely pays to change the oil in your car. What I mean is that saving these little tidbits of money is not gonna end up mattering. Sorry. And yeah, I know you can take $100 and invest it in some index fund, and 100 years from now, it might be worth 1,000 or something. But here's what I've learned. Instead of nickel and diming to save those little amounts of money, invest it. But don't just invest it in something that everybody can invest in that's gonna have a really little impact on you for the next 10 years. Invest in the S&Me 500, as Hormozi always says. What I mean is, again, invest in your education, invest in learning new skills. If you can spend $5,000, learning a skill that's gonna make you $100,000 next year, don't you think you would do that? That's what I did, and I guarantee you can do the same thing, but people just don't have the foresight to look to those things in the future. Now, number 6 is not measuring your money by the time it took to gain it. Again, maybe you started making $10 an hour and now you make $50 an hour. So when you go out to eat, there's a huge difference between buying that $15 meal back then and buying it now. My first and only job in high school was working at a shoe store, Shoe Carnival, I know. And here's a crazy thing that I witnessed when I started working there. People would go on their lunch break and go buy a $15 meal. Now for perspective, we worked 4 to 5 hour shifts back in high school and made $7.05 an hour. So factoring in taxes and spending that money, which most of the people that work there did every day, you would only make 2 hours of pay every day that you work there. 15 bucks. Now if you make $50, maybe it's a different story. It's a lot less money in the grand scheme of things. But back then, wow. Measure your money with the time it took to make it. I can't imagine not valuing my time at higher than that. 5 hours of work for 15 bucks. Now the last mistake, number 7, is one that triggers me all the time, and that's people that use the word afford. Using the word afford is stupid because it's not getting the point. If you're saying that you can or can't afford something, you're looking at it from a perspective of what's the maximum amount of money I can spend that I already have. And that's a recipe for going broke. If you're focusing on hitting your spending limits instead of reducing the amount of money that you're spending, you're in the wrong place. So quit spending money on things that nobody cares about, focus on building your education, and don't be stupid.